Welcome to the Soulish Podcast, and thank you for being here. My name is Whitney Apke, and I'm your host. On the Soulish Podcast, we're talking all about the aha moments, the uncomfortable and painful lessons of life, how to deeply connect with ourselves and others, and the breakthroughs, big or small, that we experience in our body, soul, and spirit. We'll dive deep, and I'm so excited to share my experiences and thoughts, as well as bring on guests who are thought leaders and truth seekers. It's my desire to uplift, encourage, and inspire you in each episode. And for this episode, I have a really special guest, Kat Ho. She is quite literally living my wild woman nomadic dreams right now because she literally travels the country with her husband and has even lived in a bus that's converted. It's so my dream. But she also embodies that strong, independent woman archetype unapologetically. She is the host of the Unearthed Offerings Podcast and is fearlessly authentic and vulnerable and calls us to enter into that same freedom. She offers Soul Immersion, Theta Healing, Reiki sessions, and she just shares her journey of spirituality and growth and her background, and it's amazing. It's going to be super inspiring for you guys. So here's my conversation with Kat. Thank you so much, Kat, for being on the podcast. This is so cool to have you, to have met you and record a podcast episode with you in one day, but that is how it works out, you know, in the spirit energy world. When you just feel like it's right, it's right. And I just loved your story and your background. And I actually was able to take a couple listens at your podcast, which I just love. I love the drums at the beginning because I'm also Native American. So that gets me all going.
Yeah.
I didn't know that you were actually originally from Southern California, Laguna Beach area. And so I think that's really cool. You're a Californian at heart.
I am. And it's super weird because that's not typically something I share with people when I meet them. Cause you know, sometimes like people just have that perception of like, oh, well, you're a Valley girl. And I'm like, God damn, like, no, I'm not, you know? But yeah, I grew up on the coast and then moved to the other coast. I moved to Florida for a while, then ended up in Indiana for quite some time, like 10-ish years. And then a couple years ago, decided to move to Utah on a whim. Without my husband, I just was like, hey, there's an opportunity. I'm going to go, check it out. And then ended up falling in love with it and convinced him to come out with me. So I guess I've been doing geographically. Yeah.
You should do your astrocartography. That's like something I'm getting into and like learning because if you haven't already, because I think like it would be cool to see like I'm nomadic at heart and these are all the places that, have like good energy, good, like maybe discovering something new or something like that in it. And so that'd be really cool to like figure out.
That would be super cool. And like, that really resonates because I don't know who mentioned it, but a few months ago that came up and I'm like, I never thought about that because like when I go and like move to a new place, I just kind of intuit it, and like, the next place I'm trying to end up in, whether like, if it's not back at Zion, I was living right outside of there. If it's not there, it's Sedona because anytime I go to Sedona, it's magnetic and like, I feel it and I feel at home and, but yeah, like that would be really cool to kind of give my nomadic to a fault some clarity, It'd
just be cool to see, like, do any of those places, have you already been there? And if you were there, what were your experiences? And then to see the places that it also has you in what ways? Because I guess like you can see which lines are for like business career oriented or just life, or there may be something like really cool there to discover or like enhance your journey in some way. So it's really cool to figure out, but I loved your background and I kind of wanted to dig into that if that's okay. Your journey, I was just listening to your podcast episode where you talk about your journey, like where you came from, like how this all started for you. And I thought it was so cool that you're so vulnerable and so open and
thanks.
And so real. Like you just have this rawness about you, this vulnerability about you that is just beautiful. And I just love that you technically came from Vietnam, but you were born here and didn't really know your dad until a few years later, but found out that you're not only Vietnamese, but you're also Native American and Italian when you finally met your dad.
Right.
And so how did that impact you or influence you? Or did it make you feel like, I got it? Like, I finally understand why I feel all these feelings of spirituality, maybe with the Native American, why you feel so emotional and in the flow because you're Italian. They're very flowy and go with the flow and enjoy life.
Right.
And so I didn't know if any of that kind of like made sense, maybe from your Vietnamese culture and being brought up in that.
Yeah, totally. Like, it's really fascinating because, our cells, like, we hold so much information, and like, whether it's, good memories or like traumas, micro traumas, big traumas, like all that stuff. Like, we hold so much on a cellular level. And like, growing up, not knowing my heritage, except for, hey, like, my family, like, I'm a first gen American, and like, I'm Vietnamese, and no one ever talked about like any other part of my heritage because no one had any clue, really. And, or maybe they did and they just didn't want to share with me. They didn't want me to like get curious, and which worked out to bite them in the ass because I'm curious as hell, and when I finally got to meet my dad, I was like, I think I was like, it was 2016, so a few years ago. And yeah, and that was the first time we ever like talked, like at all, like any communication, and then like met in person. And it was huge. And it was like, in that moment, and this might sound like, I don't know, kitschy or like movie like, but like in the moment when I met him in person, like I flew out to Portland and saw him, and everything, like it was like my cells were like regenerating almost, and like remembering. I have like a half brother too. So like, he was either an immigrant from Italy too, or he was like the first of his family to be American citizen, by birth and whatever. And, so that was really cool to see that on both sides, because I grew up surrounded by like such a lack mentality, with my family upbringing and everything. And it was chaotic and beautiful. Like I wouldn't have traded it for anything, because I learned so many deep lessons. But yeah, and then like finding out, my Native American heritage too, was really powerful, because years before I met my dad or was even in contact with him to know that, my husband and I were like going to powwows and really involved with that community here in Indiana. And yeah, and like it all kind of came together, and really, really affirmed me as like, feeling like a lone wolf for so long growing up. And like, at times it would get a little depressive and like isolating, but then there was always that like deep anchoring voice that was like, you are like, this is who you are, and this is beautiful, and like, you're worthy, and you just need to fucking own it, like. And yeah, that just kind of powered me through to like, be confident and like live boldly with intention, and not use like, that solitude or whatever as like a crutch, but using it as like, this is my power and I'm going to stand in my power.
Have you always felt spiritual? Like, what was that process of you coming into doing and being all that you are now, as far as on your spiritual journey?
Oh God. I was just kind of like a weirdo growing up. Like, I was always really in tune, and like my grandparents, they raised me, and they were my parental figures growing up. And they still like call me like their daughter, and and it's just such an interesting dynamic. And they were really involved with like their Vietnamese ministries and like church and stuff like that. But I don't know, man. I feel like I've just been so fortunate to be guided by like my Native American ancestors since I was younger, without even like having the recognition of that. Like, because it always, for me, when my family would talk about God or like whatever, it was like my view of God was so much more vast. It was like creator spirit, like the earth is living, like we're all one. And like I just had that inner knowing, but I sounded fucking weird anytime I would talk like that at all, you know? So I just kind of kept it to myself. And yeah, it's, you know, it's kind of hard to like, depending on what social circles you're in, you know, it could be kind of limiting to your potential. And I feel like a lot of people can relate to that, you know, whether it's like your friends or like, you know, your partner or your family or whatever social circles. Like if it's limiting your potential, like if you're scared to speak up, that's a sign that you're not living in your truth.
You definitely are a person who speaks your truth. And that's a big deal for you to be silenced, to not be honored when you're speaking what's true for you, what you're comfortable with, what feels right for you. That's a big deal for you.
Yeah.
So I love that. I think it'd be really cool if you feel comfortable just talking about some of the things that you went through when you were between homes, because you lived with your grandparents for a while and then went back with your mom with a new dude who also wanted to adopt you. I guarantee during that time that there was a lot that went down. What were some of the things, like the hardships, things that you went through that you had to overcome, heal from?
Just like a quick brief on that is like, you know, born and raised California for about a decade or so. Mom met some dude in Florida before like internet dating was really a thing. So like super sketch, and was like, hey, this is a great idea. You know, so I go out there and I was like 9, 10, whatever age you are in 4th grade. And I was out there living with her in the sky. And I just like, it's not like, you know, if anything actually happened that was really painful or whatever, I probably have repressed that. But I just remember one day, like my little 4th grade ass waking up, I packed my Hello Kitty suitcase and I called my grandparents and I was like, listen, I'm out, buy me a plane ticket and I'm going to find a way to the airport, whether it's like mom or, you know, a friend or whatever, like 4th grade, you know, and I just like stood in my power. Like I was so confident and I didn't, you know, address her or anything. I wasn't like, hey, like, I don't, you know, I really don't enjoy the way he treats me. I don't enjoy the way he treats you. Like you know what I mean? There was none of that. Yeah. And there was no guidance and to no fault of anyone at all. And so, you know, the rest of that was like a blur and I ended up back in California. So spent a year without her, hanging out with my grandparents and just, you know, them doing their best. Like I didn't really, and this sounds very shitty, but like this is just me being real. Didn't really miss her. Not in like a, I hate my mom way. Like that wasn't it at all. It was just like, this is what we're doing now, you know, no big deal, whatever. And I'm wondering now, like looking back at my child, like me, you know, if your nonchalantness is like a trauma response, because I am so nonchalant about so many things that I should probably give a shit about, you know, like now. And my husband points that out all the time. He's like, babe, like whatever it is, like this is kind of a big deal. Like you're super casual about this. And I'm like, oh yeah, I mean, I don't know how to give a shit about those things, you know? So it's interesting to analyze that now. And then when she came back with this new dude to introduce me, who she's still with him right now. And I was like, you know, going into 6th grade or something like that. And I remember walking up to him. He was like standing under this tree with her and they were so excited to like introduce me, you know, and I just had this like thinking, like in my solar plexus feeling, like gut reaction of fuck, this is not right. This is not right. And, you know, time unfolded. Like we moved back to Florida with him. We moved to Indiana. And it was just like, it was toxic. And it like deeply, lots of, I mean, without like getting too far into it, just a cultural barrier, and like almost as if like my culture being mixed, being all these things wasn't relevant, or like my way of doing things is archaic, or just like really hurtful things, like a lot of like microaggression growing up that I had to deal with and like process on my own, because someone like my mom has never had the tools, or like maybe even the discernment to stand in her own power, which is why it seems like she would get into these situations. And I look back and it's like I don't blame her for anything. I don't blame the dudes. Like I don't, there's none of that. It's just, how can you observe your human from like a higher perspective and see the lesson in that?
At the beginning of every year, as an offering of gratitude to the universe for all that I have been blessed with, I donate to a charitable organization that's mission aligns with mine. And this year, I am donating to No Kid Goes Hungry. In 2018, over 38 million Americans lived in poverty, and an estimated 15 million of those were children. According to the USDA, before the coronavirus pandemic, more than 11 million children in the United States live in food insecure homes, which means that those households don't have enough food for every family member. Today, projections show that 18 million children could face hunger this year. If this also resonates with you, join me this year in donating to No Kid Goes Hungry. The link is in the show notes for your convenience, or go to nokidhungry.org.
So then like time went on, and it, like around the time when I met my dad, actually, I cut my mom out completely, like cold turkey. And her and I have had like a rocky relationship since fucking forever, and I just think if I could analyze it from my perspective, I would say that it's probably because like I am so much like my dad. Like he's very nomadic. He's lived off the grid in Washington for 16 years. Like I think he just moved into his own place 2 months ago. Like, dude, like completely off the grid. Like the first time I met him, we're, like building a fire, from which I love doing, building a fire, cooking our dinner on that. Like there's no running water, there's nothing, and so like I just like that wild woman in me comes from my dad, and like that was definitely passed down to me. And I think there was a lot of resistance to that growing up, because my family that raised me, like coming from an immigrant family coming over to America, like you want to build, and you want like just the dream, or whatever that is, and so me always being so like deeply connected into nature, and like into nature's lessons, and like the ancient wisdom of all of that, and like it's that shit's free, like, and that's just not cool to that type of family, so I think I brought up a lot of hurt in her, which is why we had such a tumultuous relationship. And so I cut her out cold turkey. And, I know to like most people that's going to seem really shitty, or like, even like some people would probably say it's like cowardly or like whatever, but it just had to happen. And in that time of cutting her out, I grew exponentially. Like I regained my clarity on like, you know what? I am the writer of my own reality. Like I am the creatrix. I can choose to extend compassion. And you know what? If I want to be in balance, like I can choose to not extend compassion, but how far is that going to get me? Like I got to work through just a lot of shadows, and there was a lot of reparenting my inner child, and like kind of reprogramming. Like I was holding a lot of like repressed shit, in myself. So I did some plant medicine journeys and learned a lot about myself from that. And then this past September, it was my 27th birthday. And this goes back to like me being so nonchalant as a trauma response. You know, I'm in Florida for my birthday, and I guess like in the past couple years, I heard through the grapevine, she had moved back to Florida, and I was visiting an old friend. And I wake up on my birthday and I'm like, you know what? Like, and my mom's been blocked on everything. Like, didn't know where I lived, didn't know I moved to Utah, didn't like nothing, you know? And I just want to like also say, none of those years did I regret cutting her out, and none of those years did I harbor hate. It was really, it was really beautiful because it didn't take that long for me to realize, you know what, I don't hold anything against her for doing the best that she could, for tapping into her own reality, even though I didn't align with it. And like, I have no judgment toward her, even though I don't agree. I mean, who the fuck cares if I agree or not? It's not my life. So like, I'm going to create my own life, you know? And so there, like, yeah, there was no hate, no bitterness toward her. And that was beautiful. And like, that's the space and foundation in which I grew from, and was able to like go further down this path than I probably would have if I allowed her to stay in my life. And so anyway, so my birthday this past September, I looked at my friend, like woke up in the morning, and as casual as anything, I was like, it's been 4 or 5 years. Like, I think I'm going to shoot her an email and like see if she's around and like wants to grab coffee. I don't know. Like, what do you think? And she was like, Kat, that's like a big deal. Like, are you ready for this? Like, I support you, whatever you want to do. And I was like, yeah, well, whatever. And that was insane because it was so casual and there was no anxiety. And like, I used to be a victim of like my anxiety. You know, I used to have panic attacks all the fucking time. And like growing up in the house with her, especially with that dude, it was a wreck. And like, I lived there during college too. Like it was just a mess all the time. And it was really hard on like my husband and I's relationship. Like him and I had been dating for 5 years before we got married, and we've been together almost 10 years. Like it'll be 10 years next fall. And that's a long time to be with someone and like have that disapproval, you know, not only of me, but like of us. So yeah, so like I was just like a product of my environment really. And I just kind of sat in that for a while. And that sucked, and that like sucked the life out of me. And so anyway, so then to just so casually say, you know, I'm going to email her, and like none of those ugly feelings rose up. And it was just like a blanket of grace. It was like white light. And I'm like, oh my God, like there's so much love here. Absolutely. And so we've been in touch since this past fall, and there's been no like, how dare you do this to me? Like, do you realize, you know, anything? Like, there's been none of that. We've just started over. And like, forgiveness is just a given that didn't even have to be spoken.
I do love how you preface things, and you also make it clear that you gave room to your mom to be on her journey, but that you stood in your own choice and your authority and your truth to find yourself and no longer be subjected to whatever mistreatment, harm, or just a negative, toxic environment. You just chose to cut it out, which is wisdom. Wisdom would tell you the same exact thing. Cut out the toxicity in your life because it's killing you slowly, whether it's killing your spirit, numbing you down. I think trauma is really interesting, right, Kat? Because you can have a trauma response like yours and it go undetected for almost your whole life. And you sit with having that ickiness still in you energetically, in your body tissue, and not know. And so I think it's really cool that you're on that journey of discovering, why is it that I have this trauma response where I have like no emotional attachment to something or to an outcome. I literally just I'm chill with it. I'm cool with it, but not in a way that like I'm choosing, like, because I like it or because I want to, or because that sits right with me. It's almost a deflection. It's a shield.
It's not even like a heartlessness thing. It's like,
No.
you know, I'm definitely in tune with like my empathy, but it's just like when it comes to me, I'm like, life goes on. It's fine, you know? And yeah, it's very interesting to kind of break that down and start dissecting it, you know?
Yeah. Just looking at it and saying, when did I start doing that as a kid? Because I think too, when you're pulled out of a safe place, like your grandparents and your uncles that was a safe place for you. That's where you were able to be your wild, crazy gay woman self back when you were a kid. So you got to like live your nature. And then when you're pulled away again out of that, back into a place that you're not allowed to be who you truly are. As a kid, you knew who you were, which is crazy. I think that is traumatic. Like just even that of being pulled away, of being pulled away from safe place and it being unknown what this is now going to look like. I think that's really traumatic. That would scare the shit out of me if all of a sudden I'm going away with a stranger who now now he wants me to consider him dad. I don't even know this guy. And also feeling like your mom is in a safe place because she's not honoring you. She's not listening to you. Your voice does not matter. It's you're my kid. So therefore you're coming, you know?
Totally.
I think that's super traumatic. So I'm really happy that you were able to reconnect with your mom last year.
It's a vault of wealth that I have within me from all of that I went through.
Because you chose to learn the lessons that life had presented you. If you had chosen not to learn those lessons, you wouldn't be who you are right now. You'd still be on that journey of discovery, right? But it's when we choose to learn the lessons that life experience, opportunities gives us, that's how we end up growing. That's how we end up healing. That's how we end up moving forward in life, right?
Right. I read this beautiful, it's a very short quote today that totally resonated with everything we're talking about. And it just said, it ran in my family until it ran into me. And I just like reread it a few times and I'm like, shit, I don't think we give ourselves enough credit for the fact that like you have the power to like reclaim who you've always been as well as your highest potential. Like it's all existing, you know, at the same time. And you get to play into whatever you want to bring into existence. And it's like, so often I see people, you know, well, you know, my family's done like, this is our tradition, or like my family's done this, you know, forever. And like that sits comfy. Like, that's cool. That makes sense. Do you just like want your life to like make sense and like have a pattern that you can predict? And like, if so, beautiful. That's amazing. I don't understand that, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. I think that's beautiful. But also I don't think people give themselves enough credit for, you don't have to claim that as your reality, you know? So
the biggest life sucker and life stealer is to just exist through life and not live it. So I love that about your story, because even as a kid, like I feel like I was not as connected as a 9-year-old. I remember when I was 9, I was not as cognizant, as in tune, as in touch. I did have a voice. I resonate with you on the fact of being a strong-willed child, and my parents will vouch for that. Because I was a little stinker sometimes, but like as a 9-year-old, I just wanted to be free as well. Like I can feel that same quality of wanting to be free but to be safe. And I remember the times when I didn't feel safe, when I felt either hunted, like that feeling of feeling hunted, even though it's not like you necessarily,
really powerful term,
right? And you don't necessarily have like whoever is hunting you in your line of sight, but you almost feel it energetically and spiritually of like, I'm being hunted. And even in church, like I grew up in church. I'm a pastor's kid, if you didn't know that.
Dude.
So I mean, I remember there was this one guy in church, and he was probably in his 50s, maybe early 60s, had glasses, was tall, gray, and he just was a creepy motherfucker. He was so creepy. And I got like the icks, you know, like the icky goosebumps, like, whoa, like, oh, you're like, I don't know what you do, but it's not good. I can feel it.
It's not great, man. Like,
it's not good what you do.
Get that the fuck out of here.
Yeah, like icky. And to have that difference between feeling like the presence of God, you know, the universe source, and I had the box of, it was God, Jesus, the Holy Spirit, right?
God is a man, like God is a white man.
I love seeing Ariana's song now, God is a woman. I'm like, yes, he, she, it is. I can vouch, since God lives in us, right? We are God technically.
Right.
But I just remember feeling that feeling of feeling like I'm hunted, because at one point it was like his agenda to get me, to like touch me, to like grab me in church, which I'm like, who the hell do you think you are to ever think that you can touch a kid without their consent, period. I don't care if you're in fucking church. I don't care if you're fucking in a company, an organization, someone brings their kid to work. You have no fucking right to even touch their shoulder, right?
Right.
Without them saying yes, you know, without them coming into your space saying, let me give you a hug, right? That's an honor and a fucking privilege. And I think that's one thing in church that irks me all the time is like, you have no right to touch any kid. Just because you're a Christian, you have no right. And I know what it felt like to feel like I have a target. I'm being hunted. I'm being sought out. I'm being, you know, pinpointed. And that's like the worst feeling as a kid, and especially as a girl. And I think through life, I've seen where I've felt that way, whether it's in work where I feel like I'm being targeted for some reason, and I'm not sure why. Like, why is my boss have their eye on me and is like,
dude, I've been there. It's shitty. Yeah.
It's shitty for sure. And you're like, it's not even your intention to do anything wrong or to not work hard. Like, you're busting your ass, but yet you feel like you have this target on your back. And I know a lot of people can resonate with that. And I think for you, like, you were so in tune from early on that you were able to just straight up say no, you know, to like your stepdad.
I looked him in the face, 10 years old. He's down on one knee. To the outside world, so sweet. Like, hey, you know, I love your mom. I would love to adopt you. Like, you've never had a dad in your life. And my heartless little bitch ass was like, I mean, no. And then I went to my room.
You were heartless at all. I think you were in tune with your heart. I think there was something that said in you, okay, yeah, you're right. My dad hasn't been around. He hasn't been the protector that I needed growing up. No, I haven't had that fatherly, you know, cloak around me, protecting me and shielding me from things, but you're for sure not it, you know?
Right.
As little girls,
I have that within myself.
Like, that I have that within myself. I'm 10, but I can protect myself. And since my mom isn't doing that either, I say no to you. She said yes, I say no. I think there's nothing wrong with that. It hurt his feelings. I guarantee you it didn't hurt him as bad as it would have hurt you if you had just folded to that pressure, that peer pressure, and said, okay. And then you would have felt like I cut my Native American Italian heritage off. You know, can you imagine if when you had met your dad, you had said, oh, I changed my name. I said that he's now my dad, not you. You would have maybe felt that openness to welcome him into your life for the first time. So it could have changed everything for you if you had folded. And that encourages me, man, to like never fold under pressure. I'm a Cancer, Sun, Aries, Moon, Pisces rising. So I have a lot of water in my chart, a lot of fire too.
Yes, girl.
A lot of water. So I am very go with the flow. And the shadow side of that is saying, oh, okay. Which is kind of similar to like what you're saying of like that trauma response of like, okay, I don't really feel anything about it. So whatever you feel strongly about, we'll just do. Sometimes that's right. Sometimes that works. It's not like that's all the time wrong, but
right, for sure.
It's where it's coming from. Is it coming from that place of peer pressure or just pressure to do something, but you don't feel right with it? Like it's not hitting you. So that's really encouraging to me. And I'm sure for anybody who's listening, who's gone through that, because how different would have your journey been? You know, how different
for sure. I would have owed him something, you know, I mean, societally, right? Like, I mean, the shit I got when I cut my mom out, goddamn, like they were like, I'm sorry, you what? Like that's you only get one mom, you know, and I'm like, I don't, you know what? I don't do things from a place of fear, regret, or guilt. Like, absolutely not. And, did you say you were a Cancer son? And yeah, so I don't actually resonate with this. I feel like I'm very imbalanced with this, but like my Virgo sun, but I'm a Cancer moon, which is probably why I'm so blasted open, vulnerable, you know, highly emotional. But then I'm a Leo rising. So that's where like that fire and boldness
got
comes
it.
through. Kind
that
of
makes
intense.
sense.
Yeah.
I love it. That's so cool. No, I mean, you would have all the Cancer feels since you have a Cancer moon. Whereas I have a Cancer sun, Aries moon. I can get real hot real quick. It's something I'm super justice oriented. So like you probably felt that when I was talking earlier about children, that will get me. Like the mother bear comes out very easy. I'm not even a mom. I'm a dog mom, but
right.
It's so funny. But when you made the decision to cut off the toxicity, because I feel, and this is my opinion just from what you've shared, I could be wrong. I don't feel like you were cutting off your mother. I feel like you were cutting off the toxicity that your mother generated from her life choices and her decisions, and also maybe just from her. And so that's probably why you didn't direct it to her as a person. You didn't assign that to her. That's why making the decision to technically cut her off wasn't because you didn't love her, like you said, or that you hated her. You just knew this is what she's generating. And I'm choosing to walk away because I don't want this in my life anymore. Have you seen that trend in your life since then, that you've been more sensitive to toxic people that have come around you, and have you been really quick to cut them off before?
Dude, I'm so quick to cut shit out. Like, and you know what? It's really funny. I love your observation because a lot of people they can't pull that away because they're so stuck in, well, this is how society views your family, and that's just how it is. And like if you question that, well, like you don't do that. That's not even an option, you know? So I really appreciate that you could see that, like the objectivity of it, because it wasn't a personal thing. And like, no matter how hard I try to convey that to anyone, even my family, I mean, I got shit, you know, from my family, like all those years, but it's like, I was like, listen, it's not from a place of hate, like, but I can't even convey it to you because you're not open to receiving.
Right.
Hey, it's me, Whit. Did you know that I'm a certified life coach? I have been coaching and mentoring people for over a decade now, and I specialize with issues of the soul and focus on inner freedom and manifestation. I can help you realign with your values and purpose, break free from emotional blockages and negative thought patterns, and you will feel motivated and encouraged to take the necessary steps to live a fulfilling life. We all need support and someone to cheer us on or hear us out, and it would be a privilege to be a part of your journey. My sessions are designed so that you're free to address whatever you feel is most important. If you are interested, go to whitneyapke.com/coaching and sign up for a free 30-minute call. I can't wait to work with you.
I'm super curious, and I wanted to ask you, since I'm Native American as well, do you know what tribe or tribes you have? You don't?
I don't. So
Ooh.
yeah, so this is, yes. Which really, like, I mean, if I could say one thing sucks, like that would be it. I would love to know, like my human would love to intellectualize and like know. And it's like my spirit's like, bitch, does it really matter? Like you've
It
always
really
known, you know?
doesn't.
But yeah, like my dad being so nomadic for like almost 2 decades, he has like, he probably doesn't even have proof of like citizenship. Like he has no papers, like nothing. Like I don't know where the hell those got left. Like I'm pretty sure he can't legally go back into California for some bullshit that he got involved in back in the day. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't really know. I don't really ask. But yeah, I would love to find out. And what's funny is like I just recently, like this past November, got connected with my half brother. So like my dad had a kid like 2-3 years before me with
So
another
cool.
chick. Yeah, and like I never knew him at all growing up. Like didn't know his name, nothing. And then yeah, like just this past November, so like this past September and November, I reconnected with my mom, connected with my half brother for the first time, which was wild. And like, yeah, so I guess he has some information on like my dad's heritage and stuff.
Wow.
Somewhere that he's like looking into for me. So when I find out, it's gonna be big news. Like I'm so excited. I'm so excited to know if he knows.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
And I think too, like, isn't it, oh, what is it? Crap. The 23andMe. 23andMe is also another pretty cheap way of just getting everything.
I don't know if it can like break it down to the tribe though.
Like, I think it can.
Does it?
Okay. I'm not sure. I feel like I've seen people's charts and it actually, like mine, I know will say like Northern China, that I have some heritage with that because I'm part of the Chippewa tribe, which originated from Northern China and they came over. And then I'm also Cherokee, which is a really common one. Cherokee and Chippewa are actually, they were big tribes. So I wouldn't be shocked if you were actually from one of those and maybe we were sisters in a past life. But it's really crazy. I had a past life regression reading and now they had no idea what they were doing. They didn't know that that's technically what it's called, but it was in church, like Christian spirit filled church.
What?
It actually didn't happen from them. It actually just like it forced itself on me. And I now know that, like, I didn't even know until like a couple months ago that that's technically what the word would be for it. I had no idea. I just thought it was God showing me something at the time, but I didn't know how deeply connected it was. But it was this crazy story that I've never shared of basically it was me in a past life. And it happened often where tribes would go and fight other tribes, right? And I didn't know this, but technically Chippewa and Cherokee, I guess, they hated each other. And my dad's from Chippewa, my mom's from Cherokee. That's where it at least comes from. And I guess I was a part of the Cherokee tribe, from what I can remember from this. But I like literally saw this, like I relived this in this moment when I was getting prayed for, and quotes, air quotes, prayed for.
Right.
And basically, I got stolen from this tribe, and taken over and was forced to live in a hut, with this guy that just picked me, and ended up having his baby. And years later, or maybe a couple months later, because actually the baby was actually still an infant, I guess the tribe came back to take their revenge, the Cherokee tribe. And at that point, maybe they didn't know whether or not I had had a kid or, what had happened to all the women that got taken. Because typically they would kill children and they would steal the women. And rape them and all of that. I was probably gracious enough to be put in a hut by somebody and say, "You're my wife now." But I guess that would be considered grace back then. But basically they came in and they saw me, knew me, but now I'm no longer a part of their tribe because I have mated with the enemy and I now have a child. So they ended up slaying my kid, killing my kid and my husband. So I had this huge, so much out of that of loss and grief, as well as I don't know if I technically loved the guy that I was with, if it was a love story. I didn't see that much in this vision, but I just understood the dynamics and why it was affecting me so bad in that moment. And in that moment, I actually was seeking prayer because I had just found out that a guy that I fell in love with and that I was best friends with for like a year and a half prior to dating, we dated only for 6 months, but that he had a completely separate, like 2 different lives. And he, the person that I knew was not the person who was gallivanting around the Bay Area with whoever would have him. So it was just this huge rejection and abandonment and loss. And I had a vision of our future kid and all this stuff. And so again, I had felt all those feelings of loss and grief. I felt like I had miscarried. I physically felt like I had miscarried.
Wow.
I think I even technically, like, I either missed my period and then the next month was insane. I like my body was reacting. Chills. Yeah. Yeah. Cause we carry pain and emotional trauma and spiritual energetic trauma in our body. I had felt so rejected and so abandoned and so deceived. And I was like, I don't understand. Like, I should be able to get away from this, like, in a month, right? I should just like rebound and be good. Like this happens to most people. Most people get cheated on. Most people realize that the person that they were dating isn't actually who they were thinking they were. And I had seen that multiple times with other friends, girlfriends that had dated guys and stuff like that. So even though it was my first love and I fell for him hard, I couldn't figure out why it was such a big deal, like why I was having such a reaction until I saw this past life and it hit me. Wow. And I had like the deepest groan I've ever had in my life. Like I literally was doubled over and was just like, oh, like I was.
Yeah, like just that guttural, like, yes, it had to get out. Like you had to move that energy, you know? Like, right.
I even looked up at one of the church ladies. I was like, what's happening to me? And she was like, it's okay. Just let it go. I was like, okay, all right. This is nuts, you know? And
they have like no idea. Like
no idea. I started chanting something that I had never chanted before in some tribal language. I didn't know what it was. And in the Christian spirit world, I was speaking in tongues. Yes. So they just thought I was speaking in tongues and I was like moving through huge shit, you know, like moving through like this Native American background that was like past life for Christian. That was like, and they're thinking, oh, she's just having a Holy Spirit moment, you know? It's so funny.
Oh, dear God. That's great. I fucking love that. Like,
but I think too, like as you're talking about stored trauma, it is so true. Like, I feel like I connect with you on that because I know that there are times when I don't react to something that I should have a reaction to or should feel strongly about. And I think too, even that I should feel deeper than I feel, but there's been layers or levels of me that are turned off, but it's not even from an experience in this lifetime. I feel like it's past, you know, that it's something that I'm carrying over that is like, no, remember this happened to you. So you need to not feel as deep. Right. Because it'll come back to bite you. Anything that you have that you hold dear will be ripped from your arms.
And you know what? I absolutely agree with that. Like in those lessons that we learn in these past lives, which in my perspective, like, and that goes into the whole quantum thing, but like, you know, are existing right now. Like those aspects are in existence right now. So like, that's why we tap into, you know, fear, anxiety of like this or that, like people who are super anxious, like around like heights or, you know, whatever. Yeah. And like, that's absolutely tied to that shit. But you're reacting to it like right now because it's still very alive in you. And I think something powerful for me, and like your story really helped me feel less alone, because in my past life regressions and like, you know, sitting with like plant medicine and really downloading these codes and kind of rewiring myself, you know, it's like I remember sitting around this is in my mind's eye. I first met my guides, my Native American guides. I have many guides. We all do. But I first met my Native American guides in this one past life regression I had. And I won't go into the whole thing unless like you want to hear it. But basically I sat in the circle with them, and they were these men, and they were elders of the tribe. So like medicine men, shamans, Eastern woodland, like it was very specific. And I met them a second time, like more boldly, when I sat with plant medicine, and they guided me through. I mean, I was in my journey for almost like half a day. Like it was hours. Like I was in this journey. Wow. And they guided me through like all these different past lives, and they were helping me to integrate these codes, like all these light codes, you know, within. Wow. And it was really powerful. And they, you know, I met so many of my demons, my shadows and everything. And there was so much darkness, but it wasn't like menacing. Like I welcomed the darkness in because it has a purpose. Your shadows have a purpose. And I just remember those guides, like one of them in particular, he was there for most of the past lives I wandered through. And he was like, okay, you know, like in his like native tongue and everything, like I can't translate it, but basically he was like, yeah, I knew it, you know, it was like telepathically, he was communicating with me and being like, you have held on. And I remember this specifically, these words, it was like, you have held on to ancestral wounding and trauma and programming for so long, for centuries, you know, centuries passed down the line of like your ancestors just regurgitating the information they received. And then like you were saying earlier, letting life happen to them, you know, over and over and over. He was like, it stops with you, and you've always known that, but you're so strong that you've just held on to it, and it's time to let go. Like if you want to let go, like this is not your burden anymore. Like, and they, you know, then my ancestors visually, like in my mind's eye, gathered around, and there were women in there too, like everything. And they were like, you know, it like, we are so sorry. We are so sorry for the burden that you carried, but thank you for ending it here. And wow, I physically was like, you know, you mentioned like you were groaning, and it was just like the whole menstrual thing, like all that. Mm-hmm. Physically, I was shaking that energy out of my body. And like, I was performing some, you know, Theta Healing, like pulling it out of me. Like I had a shaman there, like doing the same thing. And like it manifested very, very wildly. Like it looked like a fucking exorcism. Like, you know, like there was this person there who was like learning how to facilitate these. And then there was like the shaman, and the person that was like learning was freaked the fuck out. And I don't blame her, but you know what I mean? It's like,
maybe it's not meant for her then.
No, we had to like process this stuff, you know, like it starts intellectually or like emotionally, but then it manifests like physically. And yeah,
it goes through all the levels: spirit, soul, body. Mm-hmm. It has to, in order for it to be released. And so I totally understand that. In closing, I wanted to ask you, so the work that you do is around energy healing as well as theta, right? I'm not sure if I'm going to say it right. Theta Healing? Is that
Theta Healing, yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about that? Because obviously your work is from your experience with getting healing and moving through energy and energy cleansing. So what is some of the things that you do for your clients?
I incorporate quite a bit. I develop my own sacred flow with it, just in seeing what's helped me along my journey, and then sitting with my guides and, you know, really meditating on, okay, where's my voice in this? Like, what is my unique medicine with this? Instead of doing something like Theta Healing or Reiki in a very strict and rigid way, like, how can I come from a heart-centered space with it? So, like, you know, I'm working on my Reiki certifications right now. I'm Reiki level 1 certified, but I have 2 more to go. And with that, it's really like, I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, but in my flow, I'll bring in that white light. I'll wash you over with, you know, the codes of like your higher self, or like any other archetypes, like gods, goddesses, totems, whatever, that are coming through for you. Like, I connect with your higher self, and I bring that into your realm of like understanding and receiving. And with Theta Healing, I flow into that as well for those that want to go a little deeper and like really get to the root of like their limitations. With Theta, I'm literally like, with, you know, their permission, like at the time, like I'm pulling the stagnant energy out. Like I'm pulling these deep-seated programs out of them, and then I'm replacing it with whatever rainbow light frequencies, whatever totems are coming through, even like earth energy, like Gaia, like, you know, Mother Earth. Everything has been monumental in my development as like a human and cosmic being. So like I work a lot with that, and I'm replacing whatever void is there that like I, you know, pulled out, and like replacing that. So it goes really deep, and there's been some really wild experiences like with my clients that could be, you know, an episode in itself. Like I've seen some shit, we've worked through some dark shit, and it's been amazing. And then like with all of that, I also hold private containers where for a few weeks, like I have a 4-week program where we do all of that stuff, and it could be in person and virtual, but I also provide the client with like kind of like a soulfully curated regimen of like, okay, here are the type of meditation styles that we're going to explore together. Okay, here are the archetypes that are coming in that want to work with you. Are you ready for this next step? Okay, what's holding you back? Let's pull it out and replace it with your highest potential, you know? So it's completely individualized for that person. And that's why I love the work that I do. Like, it's not, there's no like cookie cutter, like quick fix. Like we get in really deep. And that's why I call it unearthed, you know, like we're unearthing all of those juicy nuggets, you know, and really getting in there. It's really fun shit. So yeah.
That's really awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you so much for being on the Soulish podcast and sharing everything that you shared. I know it's going to be really profound and helpful for so many people who have had similar life experiences to you, but maybe didn't make the same decisions, or their journey was different but similar. And I just know it's going to resonate with a lot of people, even people that haven't gone through that and have had both parents and stayed in the same home and had all that stability and safety. I think that there still is going to be things from what you shared that's going to be such little wisdom nuggets and for everybody. So I know that there's something for everybody in what you've shared. And so thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thank you. This was super fun. Thanks for cutting to the core.
Love it.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. The Soulish Podcast is not only a podcast, but a community where we can relate to each other and support each other in our soul journeys. Join the community on Instagram and Facebook at the Soulish Podcast. And if you connected with Kat, her energy, her journey, go follow her on Instagram at CatHoArtist, as well as her podcast at Unearthed Offerings. If you want to book a Soul Immersion, Theta Healing, Reiki session, go to her website, unearthedofferings.square.site, to book and purchase merch. I'll see you guys next time.